The Clemson game is actually closer than you think.
True story.
Never too early to start talking about a big-time opponent that Georgia has week 1. We're going to give you everything that you need to know and more in late May, early June about the Clemson Tigers today on the Locked On Bulldogs podcast.
You are Locked On Bulldogs, your daily podcast on the Georgia Bulldogs. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back, everybody. This is Locked On Bulldogs, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every single day. He is Daniel. I am Clint. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Game Time, download the app right now.
Love Game Time.
Best last-minute ticket deals on the planet. More on them in a second. Daniel did hint at it before. By the way, it's Friday. Kids are out of school.
Friday to you.
Soon, summer is in full swing.
Oh, it's in full swing.
Ain't nothing stopping you from that awful feeling of having to run out on just Satan hot black asphalt with gravel sprinkled somewhere to save something that you didn't know you had to, barefoot, and scalding your foot to the point of an ambulance being needed. Smith Brothers know a thing or two about that. We're going to let you all know about Clemson today, since we're nearing dog days of summer, but don't let that fool you. Football is 93 days away, 93 days, under 100, Daniel. We are into double digits until you and I are watching Georgia football. So we thought, hey, instead of bemoaning the fact that we have 92 days until that happens, on the 93rd day we get it, and instead of bemoaning the fact that there is no other sports to be heralded in Atlanta, we thought, hey, let's give the people a dive into Clemson football and find out who they are, what they got going on, who the opponent is for the Chick-fil-A kickoff that is happening in the first week, not week 0, but week 1 of college football kickoff. So Daniel, as you're looking at this Clemson, so we're going to preview it pretty simply. We're going to talk about who the big hitters are, who stands out to us, what stands out about this Clemson team. We're going to talk about maybe some matchups that we see that we like, and then kind of just other notes and other randomness of the Clemson team. Let's start with the big picture, the big meta narrative of this Tigers club. Who are they? What are they coming back with? What does old Dabo have cooking in the kitchen for Clemson football?
Well, the meta narrative, the big narrative about this Clemson team is, and I think Georgia fans have to be careful of this because we're just as guilty as anybody on this podcast. The big narrative about Clemson football is old Dabo, as you said, and his absolute public ineptitude in modern college football, right? Like it is Dabo Swinney's inability to be less than 100 years old. Like that's the meta narrative for Clemson. This is a guy who has openly stated that he does not care for the NIL.
Has no concern.
While making $12 million a year, he does not believe that players ought to be able to profit off of their name, image, and likeness.
Oops.
And seems to actively resist more good players coming to his football team through the transfer portal.
Doesn't want them.
He would like to tell you that they got lots of transfers. They're transferring from high school to college.
That was, again, the most Dabo thing on planet Earth. We didn't
Sometimes you think Dabo can't be more Dabo.
Hold that thought.
Yeah. Hold his beer. I'm just joking. Hold his apple juice. He will be just as Dabo as he could possibly be. So that's the big picture narrative. Obviously, this team had a down year last year. Has not really looked the same, in the last couple years since Trevor Lawrence left campus. And everyone is sort of spiraling all of this into Clemson's not what they used to be. Clemson doesn't have it. Dabo can't coach. And I would just caution you as a Georgia fan listening to this show, the fact that, and this is a fact, Dabo Swinney is a laughingstock
He is.
among college football coaches in terms of how he handles his business and how he is not long for this profession in terms of like he's going to have to adapt or he's going to die just as any species does.
Literally.
But the man can still coach football and he is still absolutely he still has a roster full of talent, even though not as much talent as they probably could have had they utilized the transfer portal, but they still have a roster that is very talented. And there's still a team, that didn't have a terrible season last year. They ended the season with 5 straight wins. Obviously, they ended the season with wins over Kentucky in the bowl game. They beat South Carolina to end the season. Neither of those teams are nearly on the level of Georgia, but it is a team that still has a lot of talent. And so Georgia fans ought not get carried away, Clint, with the Dabo Swinney narrative, even though all of the Dabo Swinney narrative is in fact true.
Every single thing of it is true, but don't overlook. We've talked about this before. It's the same thing as old Shane Beamer.
You mean Dabo 2.0?
Dabo 2.0.
Yeah.
Like, we think he's a joke because he is a joke. He's a laughing stock, and yet people will get behind him.
He can coach.
He can. That's what I'm saying. Like, don't look at the Urkel. For those of us who are of a certain chronological age. All of a sudden, homeboy comes out here with some dance moves and rips off his shirt.
Stephon Urkel? Is that what you're saying? Is Dabo Swinney Stephon Urkel?
You tell me. Every once in a while, he just playing the dumb fool, playing the old Opie, and all of a sudden, oh no, you got in his grasp, and he could do a thing or two. So Clemson is that they still have weapons on offense. We're going to talk about a couple of freshmen that were All-Americans last year. A couple linebackers, a couple defensive players that are really, really talented, really skilled. It seems like Clemson always has a couple of interior defensive linemen that have the skill for it. So yeah, don't sleep. As my old coach used to say, you're running down the highway, snake gets ran over. He's dying, he's dead, but that head still's got venom in it. Don't approach it thinking it's dead and done. It's still going to strike out and get you. Don't do that with Clemson, y'all. Okay, the snake still got venom. Approach with caution.
Your coach seemed to have some very specific life experiences that maybe led to some of these things. We're going to talk about what it is about this Clemson football team that provides venom. We're going to talk Cade Klubnik. We're going to talk about the other players on this roster. We're going to talk about how they match up against Georgia, maybe things that concern us from this Clemson football team if I'm Georgia, things that make us confident if I'm Georgia going up against this Clemson team. All of that coming up right after these.
These are, in fact, game time. What if I was to tell you, Colin, I know you're listening all the way from volcanic Iceland, no longer back stateside.
He
what
home.
If I were to tell you, Colin, you home, and you're like, hey, I want to see the Celtics play in the NBA Finals, and I want to get tickets there. Hey, honey, let's hop on a flight. Let's go to Boston. Let's see if we get last-minute deals. Colin
does call me honey, and you're right. He has texted me and asked me if I want to go.
Already off the rails in the middle of an ad read. Right now, killer last-minute deals, all in prices. View from your seats, lowest price guaranteed. Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying NBA tickets. Go through the app, find the concert, the game of your choice. Find the deal that you need, look for the seats, and guess what? Game Time is the best. Daniel, I have tried every other service. They are the best. They are the cheapest. They are fantastic. Get over Game Time right now. Use the app to customize your spot and find inspiration for a deal. Save even more when you choose zone deals. Choose a section, let Game Time choose the seats. Take the guesswork out of buying NBA Finals tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use promo code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem code LOCKEDONCollege, $20 off your first purchase. Download Game Time today. Last-minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. You've never called me honey, Daniel.
Well, let's not start a conversation that you're not prepared to finish. Okay? Let's talk first about reasons that a Georgia fan might be a little concerned going into this game. Clint, what is it about the Clemson football team as you look at them that not just in a vacuum, not just like, oh, they're talented at this position, or they're talented at this position, but think about our team. Think about the way they might match up against our players. So, their offensive line versus our defensive line, their running backs versus our linebackers, wide receivers, corners, etc. What is it about this Clemson football team that if you're Georgia going in as a 13.5-point favorite, a big old favorite going into the Benz at a noon kickoff, the big nooner, on Labor Day weekend, what might give you a reason to slow down and say there's a little venom in this decapitated snake, and this is what it is?
He's not decapitated. That would mean that you just.
Anyway, his kappa has been detated from his head.
The best players on Clemson team, save Cade Klubnik. We're going to get to him in a second. Mm-hmm. The top talent, the top performers returning so far are on defense, linebacker, DB, D tackle. Those are the All-American freshmen, as well as some returning production. And then a often used or misused, I would say, running back that was behind Will Shipley as he went off to the NFL in Phil Maffa, who is now getting the featured role. He had 611 yards, 9 touchdowns the last 6 games for Clemson. Cade Klubnik, the big question mark. Talent is there. I don't think you sleep on him. I think he actually does have a really good arm and a really good processing ability. I think he happens to play for a couple offensive coordinators that suck at their job. But Peter Woods, Barrett Carter, and a whole host of TJ Parker defensive end, Mickens safety, Barnes DB. These are all defensive players. Clemson is wanting to play a close game. Now, Georgia fans, this is why this should excite you. Where are Georgia's incredible depth and best player on team currently? Oh, the offensive side of the football.
Yep, but in this segment we're supposed to be talking about reasons that Georgia fans are nervous.
Hold on, I'm getting it. I'm talking about the excitement.
Okay, all right.
Conversely, where is it on the opposite side? If that's where Clemson's best players are on defense, and we're thinking to ourselves, okay, good, but hold on, the aforementioned Cade Klubnik, all the holes. You look at the defensive side. We said the best player on the whole team, the best player, the best depth. We have wide receivers, we have offensive line, we have quarterback key rate. On defense, Daniel, what position is supposed to stop a processing, arm talented quarterback from completing passes to the receivers on the opposite end? Those guys on the corners, on the edges of the defense, untested for Georgia. And that's what we have. We have untested corners right now. We don't know what we're going to get. Cade Klubnik's coming back with not a lot of heralded receiving threats, but it doesn't matter when you have a good quarterback that can do things and a defensive back group that doesn't give me the same confidence I had a couple of years ago. And on top of that, a running back who is physical, who is just all out hair on fire, looking for touchdowns, looking for yards. And if we talk about the defensive line for Georgia being a huge strength, if that starts to wear and tear and we get play action and receivers are able to get on top of these DBs untested outside of Malachi Starks, you and I are going to be in a world of hurt, because Clemson and the aforementioned coordinator that I said kind of sucks might open up a little bit under Cade, who's going to have a lot of experience and a lot of juice coming back and a lot of hope to make it in the first round as a quarterback. Dabo trying to prove people a great deal against. If they can establish any sort of running game and play action gets on top of us and DBs are biting and double moves are there, we're in for a very, very, very long night, Daniel.
Yeah, and I actually think you mentioned him early. I think the receivers against our DBs is a legitimate concern. I actually think I wouldn't have said this before, and you don't like to overreact to G-Day or whatever, but you mentioned it. I think this Clemson defensive front is going to be really good. And so the offensive line is going to have a test right out of the gate, keeping Carson Beck upright, keeping him making sure that he's got a clean pocket to work from, making sure there's running lanes for guys, like whether it's ETN or it's Rob or somebody, like making sure there's running lanes available and there's holes that are opening up. I think the linebacking core of Clemson is going to be really good. I think the defensive front of Clemson has always been very good.
They're talented,
under Dabo Swinney, and that doesn't show any signs of changing. I would also say that I think there's a chance that Phil Maffa is going to be really good. I think there's a chance that Will Shipley leaving
is a bonus.
Clemson fans are going to be happy about that by the end of the season, because they're going to realize that they were trying to do things with this kid with, as you mentioned, just bogus fraud offensive coordinators, that they were pretty much wasting a really talented back like Phil Maffa in the backfield.
Yep.
And so I think that's going to be an early test for the Georgia defensive front, who, again, we really like these linebackers. We really like this defensive line. But coming up right out of the gate, you mentioned Clemson's interior defense, offensive line. I think there's a chance that they could have some success there. All right, we're going to come back and we're going to talk about some reasons why, as a Georgia fan, you might be optimistic about this game, which we think is a conversation you're going to enjoy right after this. And this is where we talk about what we said we were going to talk about, which is reasons Georgia fans should be excited. Clint.
Yes.
I'm not going to belabor this point. I am not going to mince my words.
Okay.
I normally do on this podcast.
You're mincing your words right now. Currently,
for the sake of opposing fans' feelings, I normally mince my words. I do care. I'm very sensitive.
An asterisk. This is
I'm very sensitive to the way that opposing fan bases feel.
People,
but let me say right now, publicly, in front of God and Brandon and everybody who may be listening to this.
What's up, Brandon? 199. Glad you're here.
199. Glad you're here, Brandon. If you're here, love you. Mean it. Cade Klubnik is not good. He's not good at football. I bit my tongue last segment while you tried to throw him a couple roses and give him a couple of kudos. He's bad. All right. Let me give you some examples.
Please do.
I mentioned that Clemson won their last 5 games last season. I mentioned that they beat Kentucky in the Gator Bowl, and I mentioned they beat South Carolina to close the regular season, 2 SEC opponents.
How did old Cade do in those games?
Okay. Well, they needed a last-second drive to come back and beat Kentucky in the Gator Bowl, and Cade Klubnik had a QBR in that game of 32.1.
So that was like on a scale of like 1
to 100.
So nowhere near
100. No. Okay. Yep. So it's 32.1. Now, in the South Carolina game, it was not 32.1. It was 25.2.
So it's kind of like golf. You go down better.
And that's worse. No, it's worse than this sport. It's worse. Yeah. All right. It's kind of like everything except golf.
There you go.
Yeah.
There you go.
It's kind of like your bank account. Like, yeah, think of it that way.
I am, and it's bad.
Right. So, Cade Klubnik, Clemson didn't score an offensive touchdown against South Carolina. They still won the game. They didn't score an offensive touchdown. Cade Klubnik has proven himself to be a incapable leader of this offensive system, and that is putting it mildly. His QBR last season was 55.0. Now, that includes the scrubs. That includes the ACC schedule. That includes everybody. We mentioned the 2 SEC teams they played. He was drastically below that QBR on those 2 teams. Now, does Georgia have a better, more talented defense than Kentucky or South Carolina, Clint? Okay.
This is perfect.
All right, then. All right. Even last year's Georgia defense, which was bad by Georgia standards, markedly better than Clemson or than South Carolina or Kentucky. So now, QBR of 55.0. Meanwhile, Carson Beck, in the game against Alabama, just to give you a point of reference of what QBR is. So let's take Georgia's worst game of the year last year.
Sure.
the SEC championship loss to Alabama. Carson Beck's QBR in that game was 84.6, Clint. His QBR for the season was 86. Okay. That's out of 1 to 100.
Still the same. Still the same scale.
Nationally, Carson Beck was 5th nationally. Cade Klubnik outside of the top 75 nationally.
So when we say
he's not good,
it's not simply us grabbing random stuff and thinking to ourselves, this seems appropriate because I'm feeling it, but rather, no, my eyeballs have told me he's bad. My empirical evidence has told me.
Also data.
Oh, that's interesting. And the rest of college football and his own coach, in which the shining glory of the last-minute drive touchdown to win was on the back of, the running back who has some talent we think is going to be really good. Better than Shipley. I would agree with that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, here's you touched it, Daniel.
Mm-hmm.
Dabo, Riley, I beg you, I beseech you, I urge you, I welcome you. Try to line up toe-to-toe with Glenn Schumann and Kirby Smart's boys and say you're going to out-muscle us running the ball down our throats.
Lord in heaven.
When I say everybody, I mean everybody has tried.
Yeah.
Okay. Not a single one has proven themselves successful in doing so.
No. You need...
You
just tell me who's beaten Georgia over the last few years. What are the teams that have beaten Georgia? You say whatever you want about Jalen Milroe.
And he's bad, but
he put a team on his back and he flat out beat Georgia last year.
Yes, he did.
Like he 100%. Flat out beat us last year. Is Cade Klubnik going to do that?
No.
But is he though?
No, he's nowhere near the caliber. Okay, Milroe's not a good quarterback. He did show out that game. I hope Alabama keeps him as their starting quarterback. Cade Klubnik, they're going to
Heisman Trophy, Clint.
Yeah, that's what I hear. Hey, Bama fans, tell us why we're wrong in the comments.
Let us know in the comments why we are not smart.
Cade is nowhere near Milroe's status. I fear Milroe. Much do I do. Now, if you were to look at the talent coming back, okay, the talent on offense is a running back, a quarterback that is middling, running back who probably has some talent, and a tight end who flashed and had a lot of receptions. I think it's 50 something like that receptions last year. Y'all never faced Georgia linebackers in the ACC.
You're going to need some generational talents out wide. And Clemson has proven that they can't find those generational talents out wide anymore. And you're going to need a quarterback who is him. And you don't have him. And maybe you think you've got your offensive coordinator problem solved. And maybe you think that you've got the system. And I'll be honest with you. And I legitimately do mean this. It can't be worse. It will be better. So, Georgia fans, don't get sucked into the trap of thinking that, this year's Clemson team, I 100% believe, will be better offensively and better all around than last year's Clemson team. I really do believe that. So, I'm not out here trashing Cade Klubnik as if, he's going to be exactly the same as he was last year. What I'm telling you is, even if he gets markedly better,
this is the point. Here we go.
He's average. If he gets markedly better, he's average now.
So of those 74 other players that were better at QBR than Cade Klubnik, 74, yes. That's more than are in the ACC, SEC, and Big Ten combined, if my math is doing something for me.
Yeah.
To get up to, again, like you said, fine, he wants to raise it up. He gets into the 30s, 35, 36, 37. That's still not tops in the SEC.
He's an average Power 5 quarterback.
That's all. Power 5, not best conferences, Power 5. So the reason to feel confident is because Clemson's offense
80th nationally, by the way, in QBR last year.
Sorry.
80th.
80th, my bad.
I said outside the top 75 because I remembered it was somewhere out there. I didn't remember exactly the number.
So what you're telling me is that
19 touchdowns and 9 interceptions the kid threw last year.
Y'all,
what's happening?
If this happened at Georgia,
this your guy?
Come
get your guy, Clemson. Come get him.
This is the horse you're hitching your wagon to. Something
gone wrong over here. Like, that's bad.
It's bad. We match up really well against Clemson. Vegas thinks so as well. That's why we're a marked favorite, double digits point spread over them. I don't hate that. I hate it because it's a lot of daggone points, but it makes sense once you break down the roster and break down the teams. We'll be back next week. We'll be doing one of these a week, looking towards the season as well as in season, doing an in-depth preview, more and more. He is Daniel. I am Clint. This is Locked On Bulldogs, part of Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day. Thanks for being part of the 1-9. We will see you all later.
See ya.